when powerful CEO Victoria Hale mocked a black mechanic, Malik Johnson, with a cruel bet, "Fix this engine and I'll marry you." She never expected him to succeed. But when Malik brought the engine roaring back to life, her arrogance turned into public humiliation, caught on camera, and spread across the internet. What began as mockery spiraled into scandal. The world dissected her words, protests erupted, shareholders abandoned her, and her empire crumbled under the weight of her own cruelty. Victoria tried bribery, threats, and denial, but Malik refused to bow, standing steady, silent, and dignified. Chapter by chapter, the balance shifted from the roadside challenge to viral outrage, corporate collapse, and finally a public reckoning where Malik's quiet strength became a symbol of justice. In the end, Victoria was left broken and forgotten, while Malik endured as proof that dignity, once tested, outlasts arrogance and oppression. The black sedan sat motionless on the edge of the empty highway, steam curling from beneath its hood. Evening light washed the landscape in copper hues, but inside the car, the air was cold with impatience. Victoria Hale slammed the steering wheel. "Damn this car. I have a board meeting in 2 hours. Do you know what that means, Vanessa?" Her assistant, pale and nervous, nodded quickly. "Yes, Ms. Hale. I've already called roadside assistance." But what?" Victoria's sharp voice cut the air. "It's been 30 minutes, 30, and I'm still sitting here, in the middle of nowhere, dressed like this." She gestured to her tailored cream suit, immaculate despite her rising temper. "This is unacceptable." A voice came from the roadside, calm and steady. "Engine trouble." Both women turned. A tall black man approached, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. His coveralls were worn, his boots caked with dust. His eyes, dark and steady, met theirs without hesitation. Victoria's lips curled. "Oh, wonderful. A roadside mechanic. Just what I needed." "I can take a look," the man offered. His tone was plain, unshaken by her sarcasm. Vanessa shifted, uncertain. "Maybe. Let him try, Ms. Hale. The service hasn't called back yet." Victoria gave a dry laugh. "And risk him making it worse. Look at him. Probably knows how to change a tire, maybe jump a battery. This car costs more than his whole life." The man's expression didn't change. "Name's Malik," he said quietly. "Engines don't care about money. They care about hands that know what they're doing." Victoria tilted her head, amused by his calm. "Hands, huh? Fine. Fix this engine in 1 try." And she smirked, her eyes glittering with cruel humor. "I'll marry you." "Vanessa," gasped Miss Hale, but Victoria's voice rose louder, ensuring her words carried. "You heard me, didn't you? 1 try. Fix it, and I'll walk down the aisle in a greasy jumpsuit." She laughed, high and cruel, echoing in the open road. A pair of joggers slowed nearby, watching. One of them snickered. "Did you hear that? She's betting marriage on it." Victoria smirked. "Let's give them a show." Malik stood silent for a moment, his gaze steady on her. He did not flinch, did not laugh. His silence was heavier, then words. Then he nodded once. "Deal." The laughter around them swelled. To them, it was comedy. To Malik, it was another stone in a pile he had carried all his life. Victoria folded her arms, satisfied. "Go on, then. Impress me." Malik walked to the hood. He placed his hand on the hot metal, as though listening to a pulse. His movements were patient, deliberate, reverent, the opposite of her careless mockery. Behind him, Victoria muttered to Vanessa, loud enough for him to hear. "Imagine the headline. CEO marries mechanic. What, a fairy tale, or tragedy?" Vanessa fidgeted. What if he actually, he won't," Victoria snapped. "People like him never do." Malik bent over the engine, his figure framed against the setting sun, as the world watched, some mocking, some curious, none indifferent. The bet had been cast. The stage was set. The sun was slipping lower, and the little roadside crowd had grown. A couple of joggers had stopped, then 2 men in business suits returning from work. And even a passing driver pulled over, curious about the drama around the luxury sedan. Victoria thrived under the attention. She leaned casually against the car, folding her arms, her designer watch glinting in the light. "Take your time," she called sweetly. "We wouldn't want a simple engine to overwhelm you." Malik didn't answer. He crouched by the hood, scanning wires, listening to faint sputters. His silence seemed to irritate her more than any argument would have. Vanessa tried again, hesitating. "Ms. Hale, maybe we shouldn't." Victoria shot her a look sharp enough to freeze her in place. Relax. He wanted to play the hero. Let's see how far he gets. One of the suited men chuckled. Never seen a CEO give marriage terms to a mechanic before. Because it's ridiculous, Victoria replied. She raised her voice deliberately. This is entertainment, gentlemen. He'll tinker a little, maybe smear some oil, then give up. End of story. Malik adjusted a bolt, then reached into his small toolkit, clearly old, scratched, and used 1,000 times. His hands moved with practiced calm. Victoria smirked. Tell me, Malik, was it? Where did you study engineering? Harvard. MIT. No. His voice was level. My father's garage. That drew a ripple of laughter from the small crowd. Victoria tilted her head as if confirming a suspicion. Of course, a garage, probably fixing lawnmowers between shifts. The words stung the air. Malik didn't rise to them. His focus never wavered, but the tension was visible in his jaw, a tightening he refused to show fully. Vanessa spoke timidly, almost apologetically. He seems to know what he's doing. Victoria rolled her eyes. Please, anyone can pretend. Real knowledge requires pedigree. Connections, not grease under the nails. She looked deliberately at Malik's hands. A young man in the crowd murmured, looks like he actually knows cars, though Victoria's gaze snapped toward him. Are you his lawyer? The boy shrank back, and she returned her attention to Malik. You really think you can just step into this world? Fixing engines doesn't make you worthy. Finally, Malik spoke softly but firm. Engines don't care about worth, only work. The simplicity of it silenced a few snickers, but Victoria laughed louder, covering the pause. How poetic. Tell me, do you rehearse these lines in your little workshop? Malik set down a wrench, unbothered. I learned to fix what was broken. Words, I save for when they matter. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Annoyance, maybe even unease, but she quickly masked it with a sneer. You'll need more than that to impress me, Vanessa whispered. Miss Hale, people are filming. Indeed, 2 phones were raised now, capturing every second. The comments in the crowd shifted from easy laughter to curious silence. Victoria noticed, too, and her pride bristled. Good, she said loudly. Let the world see this little experiment, and let them see how far short he falls. Malik wiped sweat from his brow, though the movements of his hands never faltered. He had faced worse than this, years of people like her, looking down from glass towers, spitting judgment like rain. Each insult was familiar, each silence calculated, but he had learned something long ago. The engine always told the truth. Victoria checked her watch impatiently. How much longer, Malik? Or should we start planning the wedding dress? The crowd chuckled, but it sounded thinner now, strained. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Malik tightened one last valve, his hands steady. Engines don't run on mockery, he murmured. Victoria leaned closer, her tone sharp. They also don't run on pride. Remember that when this ends, words hung heavy in the warm dusk. Malik gave no reply, only silence, waited, immovable, and it was that silence that unnerved her most. The sun was slipping lower, and the little roadside crowd had grown. A couple of joggers had stopped, then 2 men in business suits returning from work, and even a passing driver pulled over, curious about the drama around a luxury sedan. Victoria thrived under the attention. She leaned casually against the car, folding her arms, her designer watch glinting in the light. Take your time, she called sweetly. We wouldn't want a simple engine to overwhelm you. Malik didn't answer. He crouched by the hood, scanning wires, listening to faint sputters. His silence seemed to irritate her more than any argument would have. Vanessa tried again, hesitating. Ms. Hale, maybe we shouldn't. Victoria shot her a look sharp enough to freeze her in place. Relax. He wanted to play the hero. Let's see how far he gets. One of the suited men chuckled. Never seen a CEO give marriage terms to a mechanic before. Because it's ridiculous, Victoria replied. She raised her voice deliberately. This is entertainment, gentlemen. He'll tinker a little, maybe smear some oil, then give up. End of story. Malik adjusted a bolt, then reached into his small toolkit, clearly old, scratched, and used 1,000 times. His hands moved with practiced calm. Victoria smirked. Tell me, Malik, was it where did you study engineering? Harvard, MIT. No, his voice was level. My father's garage. That drew a ripple of laughter from the small crowd. Victoria tilted her head as if confirming a suspicion. of course. A carafe, probably fixing lawnmowers between shifts. The words stung the air. Malik didn't rise to them. His focus never wavered. But the tension was visible in his jaw, a tightening he refused to show fully. Vanessa spoke timidly, almost apologetically. He seems to know what he's doing. Victoria rolled her eyes. Please, anyone can pretend. Real knowledge requires pedigree, connections, not grease under the nails. She looked deliberately at Malik's hands. A young man in the crowd murmured, looks like he actually knows cars, though Victoria's gaze snapped toward him. Are you his lawyer? The boy shrank back, and she returned her attention to Malik. You really think you can just step into this world? Fixing engines doesn't make you worthy. Finally, Malik spoke softly but firm. Engines don't care about worth, only work. The simplicity of it silenced a few snickers, but Victoria laughed louder, covering the pause. How poetic. Tell me, do you rehearse these lines in your little workshop? Malik set down a wrench, unbothered. I learned to fix what was broken. Words, I save for when they matter. Something flickered across Victoria's face, annoyance, maybe even unease, but she quickly masked it with a sneer. You'll need more than that to impress me. Vanessa whispered. Ms. Hale, people are filming. Indeed, 2 phones were raised now, capturing every second. The comments in the crowd shifted from easy laughter to curious silence. Victoria noticed, too, and her pride bristled. Good, she said loudly. Let the world see this little experiment, and let them see how far short he falls. Malik wiped sweat from his brow, though the movements of his hands never faltered. He had faced worse than this. Years of people like her, looking down from glass towers, spitting judgment like rain. Each insult was familiar, each silence calculated. But he had learned something long ago. The engine always told the truth. Victoria checked her watch impatiently. How much longer, Malik? Or should we start planning the wedding dress? The crowd chuckled, but it sounded thinner now, strained. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Malik tightened one last valve, his hands steady. Engines don't run on mockery, he murmured. Victoria leaned closer, her tone sharp. They also don't run on pride. Remember that when this ends. The words hung heavy in the warm dusk. Malik gave no reply, only silence, waited, immovable, and it was that silence that unnerved her most. For a long moment, no one spoke. Malik stood at the open hood, his hands resting on the edge of the car as if steadying himself before a leap. The twilight deepened, casting gold across the metal, shadows across his face. Then he closed the hood with a heavy click. It's ready. Victoria arched a brow. Ready for what? To embarrass yourself. Malik's voice carried no bravado, only quiet certainty. Start the car. A ripple of anticipation ran through the crowd. Phones angled closer. Even Vanessa's hands trembled as she reached for the keys, but Victoria snatched them first. Her smirk was tight, brittle. Fine. Let's put this little play to rest. She slid into the driver's seat, pressed the button, and the engine coughed once, then roared awake, smooth and steady, like a lion stretching after sleep. The deep vibration filled the air, alive, undeniable. Gasps burst from the crowd. One man whistled low. The older passerby with the cane chuckled softly, as if he had known all along. Victoria's face drained of color. She gripped the steering wheel too hard, her knuckles pale. Malik stood silent, watching, his expression unreadable. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. His eyes only met hers through the windshield. Calm and steady, as though saying, now the engine has spoken. The onlookers erupted in murmurs. He actually did it. In one try. Didn't she say she'd marry him if he fixed it? Laughter spread, not the sharp, cruel laughter from earlier, but nervous, incredulous, almost disbelieving. Victoria stepped out of the car quickly, slamming the door. Well, congratulations, you managed not to ruin my vehicle. Do you want a medal? But her voice wavered, brittle as glass. The old man's words cut through. No, young lady. You promised something far greater. Phones caught every syllable. Every face watched her squirm. Vanessa whispered urgently. Ms. Hale, everyone heard you. Victoria's gaze snapped to Malik. This doesn't mean anything. It was a joke. You understand that, don't you? Malik tilted his head slightly. His voice was low, even, but it carried across the hushed crowd. Take people at their word. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. A jogger muttered, half laughing, half serious. Guess there's going to be a wedding. More laughter rippled, but now Victoria wasn't in control of it. She was the punchline. She tried to brush it off, forcing a cold laugh. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Do you think I'd lower myself too? She caught herself, realizing, too late, the sentence she had nearly finished. Cameras were still recording. Malik didn't move closer, didn't chase the moment. He only stepped back, wiping his hands clean with his rag. His silence, once mocked, now carried the weight of judgment. But Victoria could feel it pressing on her chest. The shift, the humiliation, the loss of control. Let's go. She snapped at Vanessa, shoving past the crowd. She slid back into the car, slamming the door again, the hum of the newly revived engine mocking her pride. As the sedan pulled away, the onlookers watched in stunned silence, then slowly dispersed, their whispers trailing behind like embers carried by the wind. Malik remained by the roadside, rag in hand, eyes calm but distant. He had not won, he had simply endured. And sometimes, endurance itself was victory. By the next morning, the roadside incident was already spreading like smoke. What had begun as laughter among strangers now lingered in whispers that followed Victoria Hale into her glass-walled office tower. "Good morning, Miss Hale," her receptionist said with forced brightness. But as Victoria passed, she caught the woman exchanging a look with a colleague, a look that stung more than words. Inside the elevator, two junior analysts hushed their conversation the moment she entered, yet she still heard the fragments, fixed it in one try. She said she'd marry him, followed by nervous giggles. Victoria's jaw tightened. She stepped off the elevator with a click of her heels, her presence as commanding as ever. But inside, unease coiled like smoke. In her office, Vanessa set a stack of reports on the desk. "Miss Hale, about yesterday," Victoria cut her off sharply. "We don't speak of it again. It was nothing but a roadside joke. Do you understand?" Vanessa hesitated. "But people filmed." "I don't care." Victoria's voice cracked like a whip. "This company runs on numbers, not gossip. The internet will forget by tomorrow." But even as she spoke, her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced down. Unseen clip surfaces. CEO, mocks mechanic, bets marriage if he fixes car. The headline was bold, merciless. Beneath it, a blurry video thumbnail showed her laughing in the dusk. Malik's quiet figure bent over the engine. She slammed the phone face down. Garbage. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Malik sat at a chipped wooden table in his modest apartment. His mother, Leela Johnson, poured tea into two mismatched cups. "You've been quiet since last night," she said softly. Malik shrugged. "It was nothing. Nothing doesn't spread across every phone in the city." Her eyes, wise and worn, searched his face. "People are talking, Malik, about her, about you. I don't care what they say." He sipped his tea slowly. "Words don't change the work I do. But they can change how people see you," she said gently. "And sometimes, that matters." He said nothing, but his silence was not empty. It was heavy with years of swallowed insults, with the weight of being underestimated, mocked, dismissed. Back at the tower, Victoria's board meeting was tense. Numbers flickered across a screen, but the air buzzed with unspoken distraction. Finally, one shareholder cleared his throat. "Victoria, before we proceed, we need clarity. This video circulating online, was it real?" Victoria forced a smile. "An out-of-context joke, nothing more." Another board member leaned forward. "Be that as it may, the optics are damaging our brand values, inclusivity, and respect. What the public sees is troubling." Victoria's grip on her pen whitened her knuckles. "I am not going to let a roadside mechanic dictate the direction of this company." Her words landed like stones, heavy and harsh. Several faces around the table darkened. The meeting ended with thin smiles and sharper whispers. That evening, Malik walked through his neighborhood, passing a small grocery store. Two teenagers pointed at him, whispering, then burst out laughing. "Yo, that's the guy from the video," one called. "The CEO's future husband." Their laughter rang out, but it lacked cruelty. It was more like disbelief at a bizarre joke. Still, Malik walked on without responding, his face set, though his heart carried the sting. At home, his mother touched his arm. "Don't let them twist you, son. You held your dignity." "That's more than most," he nodded, though his eyes lingered on the worn photo of his late father above the mantel, the man who had taught him silence could be strength, but who had also warned, sometimes silence must break. In her penthouse, Victoria stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights glittered like stars beneath her, but she could still hear the engine's roar echoing in her mind, mocking her. Fix this engine in one try, and I'll marry you. Her own voice replayed, cruel and careless, now turned against her by countless strangers online. She poured herself a glass of wine, her hand trembling ever so slightly. It will pass, she whispered. They'll forget. They always forget. But deep down, she knew, this time, they wouldn't. By the next week, the video was everywhere. What began as shaky phone footage uploaded by a jogger had exploded across social media feeds, news sites, and morning talk shows. Arrogant CEO bets marriage on mechanics, skill loses, class, race, and cruelty collide at the roadside. When a joke exposes the truth, clips replayed her smirk, her cruel words, fix this engine in one try, and I'll marry you. Then came the roar of the engine, followed by Malik's calm statement, I take people at their word. The internet had crowned him with a kind of reluctant fame. At the small garage where Malik worked, customers he'd never seen before began showing up. You're that guy, right? A middle-aged woman asked, her phone already in her hand. Can I take a picture? My daughter saw the video. Malik forced a polite nod, but his discomfort was plain. He bent back under a hood, pretending not to hear the whispers. Is he really engaged to that CEO? One man asked his friend in a too loud whisper. No way. But he put her in her place. About time someone did. The noise followed him even as he walked home. Journalists began leaving cards at his door. Strangers called his name from across the street. The world wanted him to play the role of hero, but Malik had never wanted a stage at night. He sat with his mother at the small table. People will twist this into whatever story they want, he said bitterly. To them, I'm not a man, I'm a headline. Leela set her hand over his. Then, don't let them define you. Let your dignity speak, louder than their noise. Meanwhile, inside Halley Enterprises, the mood had shifted from amusement to alarm. At an emergency meeting, a board member pushed his tablet across the glossy table. Victoria, have you seen this? We're trending for all the wrong reasons. Victoria scanned the headlines flashing on the screen, her face stiffed. I already issued a statement. I said it was a joke. Misinterpreted. Another director interjected, but the video doesn't look like a joke. You're laughing, yes, but cruelly. And the man's calm response. It makes you look. He hesitated. Like what? She demanded. Like a bully. The word hung in the air, like poison. Victoria rose from her chair, bristling. I am the face of this company. I built its reputation. I will not be torn down over a roadside farce. But her anger didn't hide the flicker of fear in her eyes. That same evening, Victoria met with two of her closest friends at a rooftop bar. Just spin it, one of them said, sipping champagne. Say it was performance art, satire, or, better yet, another chimed in, accuse him of setting you up. People love a conspiracy. Victoria shook her head, restless. He didn't even say anything. That's what makes it worse. He just looked at me, as if my words meant something real. Her friend laughed. So what? He's a mechanic. No one will care in a month. But Victoria wasn't so sure. The memory of the crowd, the shift in their laughter, haunted her. For the first time, she had felt her power slip across the city. Malik sat on a park bench at dusk, his phone buzzing with messages. Some were hateful, calling him an opportunist. Others were fawning, calling him a hero. He ignored them all, staring instead at the children playing nearby, their laughter untainted by cruelty. A reporter approached cautiously. Mr. Johnson, could I have a few words about the bet? Malik shook his head. I have nothing to say, but the world wants your side. I'm not interested in being anyone's story, he said, standing. His voice was calm, but edged with wariness. I fix engines, that's all. Yet as he walked away, he knew the world would not let him remain silent forever. In her penthouse, Victoria scrolled through the comments under her company's official page. Fire her. This is what corporate arrogance looks like. We stand with Malik. Her glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. For the first time, she realized this was no longer a joke she could control. It was a storm, and she was at its center. The knock on the garage door came just after closing. Malik wiped his hands on a rag, already weary from a long day of unwanted attention. Sorry, we're done for, he stopped. Victoria Hale stood framed in the doorway, designer heels clicking against the oil-stained floor. She was out of place in every possible way. Immaculate suit, flawless hair, but eyes sharp with something brittle. Fear, disguised as rage. Malik Johnson, she said, her voice like ice. He turned back to his workbench. Miss Hale, her lips tightened. We need to talk. Privately. There's nothing to say. There's everything to say, she snapped, stepping inside. Do you have any idea what your silence has done to me? Malik looked at her, then, steady and unflinching, my silence. Yes, she threw her purse onto a stool. You just stood there. You let the internet twist it. You made me look like what you are, he said softly. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she faltered. Then the mask returned. I'm offering you a chance to fix this before it ruins both of us. Malik folded his arms. Fix it? How? You go public. Say it was staged. A prank? Performance art? Whatever. I'll pay you for your time. He cut her off. You want me to lie? I want you to be smart. She leaned closer, her voice low, sharp. Do you think these people online actually care about you? They'll forget your name next week. But me, I have investors, contracts, an empire. You can't stand against that. Malik held her gaze. I'm not standing against you. You're the one who put yourself here. Her composure cracked. Don't act righteous with me. You enjoyed it, didn't you? Watching me squirm. He shook his head. I don't enjoy cruelty. That's your domain. Her eyes flared. You think you're better than me? No. He leaned against the workbench, voice calm but cutting. Just not worse. The silence between them was taut as wire. Outside, cars passed, muffled through the thin garage walls. Inside, her breathing was sharp, uneven. Finally, she straightened, adjusting her jacket as though armoring herself again. Fine. If you won't take money, then take this as a warning. My people will bury you if you don't cooperate. Malik's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. I've been buried before. Still here. She blinked, caught off guard by his quiet defiance. Leave, Miss Hale, he said, turning back to his tools, before you lose more than your company. For a moment, she stood frozen, her nails digging crescents into her palms. The mask she wore, cold, polished, untouchable, wavered. Beneath it, fear flickered raw. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, heels striking the pavement like gunshots. Malik stayed at his bench, staring at the rag in his hand. His heart was steady, but the weight of her threat lingered. This was no longer just about a bet. It was war, one he had never asked for, but could no longer walk away from. The boardroom was silent except for the hum of the projector. Charts and numbers glowed on the screen, all pointing downward, but Victoria Hale sat at the head of the long table, shoulders rigid, jaw clenched. Across from her, the directors shifted, in their seats, some avoiding her eyes, others watching with cold calculation. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. Victoria, we've stood by you through market dips, hostile takeovers, even scandal, but this, he tapped the tablet before him. This is different. It's nonsense. Victoria snapped. A smear campaign. A roadside mechanic, with a lucky moment. The HR director spoke carefully. It isn't just the mechanic. It's your words. They're everywhere. Replayed, dissected, condemned. The public sees arrogance, racism, cruelty, and they're associating all of it with this company. Victoria slammed her fist on the table. I built this company. Do you think one video erases that? Silence followed. The answer was obvious. Outside the tower, protesters had begun to gather. Signs read, "Respect is not a joke. We stand with Malik." Chants echoed up the glass walls. A drumbeat of anger she couldn't escape. News anchors replayed the video alongside panels of experts dissecting her words. This isn't just a careless remark, one commentator said. It's symbolic of a larger culture of entitlement and bias in corporate leadership. Hashtags trended hourly. Hashtag justice for Malik. Hashtag end corporate arrogance. Victoria Hale, exposed. At home, Malik watched none of it. He worked late at the garage, the hum of engines drowning out the noise of the world. Still, customers trickled in, some to shake his hand, others just to say thank you. You showed her, one young man said, admiration in his voice. I wasn't trying to, Malik replied quietly, but you did. You reminded people that dignity matters. Malik gave only a faint nod, retreating back to the engine before him. He wanted no crown, no stage, just silence, just worked out in her penthouse. Victoria poured herself another glass of wine, staring at the television where her own face glared back at her. Commentators debated whether she should resign. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from investors, PR consultants, even old friends who now offered advice instead of loyalty. When she answered one, a sharp voice snapped at her, "Step down, Victoria. Save what's left before you drag us all into ruin." She hung up without responding, her hand shaking as she set the phone down. Her empire, the empire she had ruled with iron pride, was fracturing, piece by piece. The final blow came at a press conference. Victoria stepped up to the podium, cameras flashing, microphones bristling like weapons. The protesters outside were so loud she could hear them through the walls. She forced a smile. "I want to address the recent misunderstanding." The crowd shouted over her. "Say his name. Apologize to Malik." Her smile faltered. It was a joke, taken out of context. Boos erupted. Reporters fired questions like bullets. "Do you deny mocking him? Do you believe your words reflect racial bias? Will you resign?" Her composure cracked. "Enough," she shouted, slamming her hand on the podium. The room froze, but not in awe, in horror. The cameras caught it all. Her rage, her desperation, her unraveling. That night, the headlines were merciless. Hale unhinged, CEO breaks under pressure. From power to pariah, alone in her penthouse, Victoria stood at the window, staring down at the city that no longer bowed to her. The glass reflected her face, tired, pale, unrecognizable. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to fall, and there was no one left to catch her. The community center was packed, every folding chair filled, people standing shoulder to shoulder. The air buzzed with anticipation, the kind that came before speeches that mattered. Malik sat at the side of the stage, hands folded, feeling out of place. He had resisted this invitation for weeks, but the organizers had insisted. "People need to hear from you. You've become a symbol." Symbols, Malik thought grimly, were dangerous things, but when the crowd clapped as his name was called, he rose. The applause swelled, honest and warm. He stepped up to the microphone. "I'm not a speaker," he began, his voice low. "I'm just a man who fixes engines. That's all I wanted to do that day." The room hushed. Leaning in, "I didn't ask for attention. I didn't want a bet or a stage. But when someone mocks you, strips you down because of where you come from, or the color of your skin, you've got two choices. Stay silent, or stand steady." He paused, scanning the faces. "I chose steady. Not for revenge, not for pride, but because dignity doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to everyone." The applause started softly, then grew, filling the room until the walls shook with it. Malik stepped back, humbled, almost embarrassed, but grateful. Meanwhile, across the city, Victoria Hall sat in a small office, not a penthouse, not a boardroom, just a rented space in a co-working hub, stripped of her title, her company, her empire. On her phone screen, the live stream played. She hadn't meant to watch, but curiosity gnawed at her. She saw Malik at the podium.com, steady, commanding, respect without demanding it. The crowd hung on his words, not because of power, but because of truth. Her throat tightened. This was what she had never understood. Respect wasn't seized, it was earned, and she, for all her wealth and status, had never earned it. The next morning headlines praised Malik's speech. "Mechanic speaks truth to power, from mockery to movement. Dignity in the face of arrogance." Victoria's name appeared too, but always as a shadow, a cautionary tale. The fallen queen. Weeks later, Malik returned to the garage on a quiet Sunday. The world had moved on, but customers still came, some just to shake his hand. He thanked them, fixed their cars, and kept his peace. One afternoon, he found an envelope on the counter. Inside was a short note in familiar handwriting. "I was wrong. Not just about the engine, about everything. Victoria." No return address, no plea for forgiveness, just an admission, naked and small. Malik read it twice, then folded it neatly and set it aside. He felt no triumph, no bitterness, only a quiet release. He turned back to the open hood before him, tools in hand. Engines, unlike people, were simple. They broke, and they could be fixed. But some lessons, he knew, had to stay broken. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire, Malik closed the garage door. The world outside still held cruelty, still carried injustice. But, for the first time in a long while, he felt lighter. Not because the world had changed, but because he had stood steady and unshaken, until it did. And somewhere in the city, a woman who once ruled like a queen now carried the weight of her own downfall, the price of her arrogance, paid in full. The seasons turned. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's wind, and with it the memory of a roadside bet faded from headlines. But for those who had watched, for those who had shared the clip and whispered the story, its echo remained. Malik still worked in the same garage, still wiped his hands with the same old rag, still greeted neighbors with a quiet nod. Customers came not for spectacle, but for honesty, for steady hands that never failed them. His life had not transformed into riches or fame, only something deeper, respect. One evening, a boy, no older than 10, lingered outside the shop. Malik knelt down. "Need help, son?" The boy shook his head. "I just wanted to see where you stood. My mama said you showed the world what dignity looks like." Malik's throat tightened, but he only smiled, resting a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder. "Then you carry it forward. That's the real work." The boy nodded solemnly, as though accepting a charge. Across the city, in a rented apartment, stripped of luxury, Victoria Hale sat at a small table littered with unopened letters. Mustafi no cameras, no empire. She had sold off pieces of her fortune to silence lawsuits, to cover debts, to remain unseen. The world had moved on without her. Boardrooms no longer echoed her name. Her invitations had dried to nothing. She turned on the television once, only to see Malik in a short feature, fixing a car, speaking softly about community programs, smiling faintly when asked about the past. He never mentioned her name. It was as though she didn't exist, and in that absence she felt the truest punishment, irrelevance, at the community center. Months later, Malik stood watching the crowd of volunteers gather tools for a neighborhood project. Someone pressed a microphone toward him, asking if he thought justice had been served. Malik shook his head gently. "Justice isn't about punishment, it's about balance. Engines run smooth when every part respects the other. People, we're no different." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't sharp, but they carried the weight of a man who had endured humiliation and refused to bow. As the sun set behind him, the garage door rolled shut, the world humming with life beyond. Victoria Hale, once untouchable, had fallen into ashes. Malik Johnson, once dismissed, had grown roots in the soil of dignity. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between power and humility, the story lived on, a reminder that arrogance burns, but respect endures.